And let's bring in Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman of New York for more on all that. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on. I want to start with tariffs. I know we have a lot of different things to cover here, but the United Auto Workers Union is praising the president's new tariffs, saying they're a powerful tool in the toolbox for undoing the injustice of anti-worker trade deals. What's your response to that?
Well, I think they better be careful what they wish for. The reality, of course, is that the cost of parts and the cost of cars is going to skyrocket, and that is going to mean less demand, and that's going to mean less work for the UAW's members. So they need to understand that this is not some sort of well-conceived strategy that Donald Trump is executing. It is completely arbitrary. It is completely random. It has spooked the market. It has reduced consumer confidence by leaps and bounds to a point where as low as it's been in many years. And it is raising costs for those same union members. So when those UAW members go to the grocery store, they are paying a lot more. Their salary goes not nearly as far because of Donald Trump's tariffs. So I think it's very easy for the UAW leadership to try to say, oh, this is better for our members. I would like to know what those members think, because I'll bet you they totally disagree.
President Trump has also criticized federal judges blocking his policies, saying they're trying to usurp the power of the presidency. And he says a disproportionate number of injunctions on his policies compared to past presidents are evidence judges are biased against him. How do you explain that discrepancy?
Well, first of all, several of these judges, including the two most prominent judges on this issue, were appointed by Republican presidents. And it is absolutely absurd for Donald Trump to say that because he won an election, he gets to determine what the law is. The Supreme Court and our Constitution has made very, very clear that the judiciary decides what the law is, not the president, and you can see why. The president is arguing that the Constitution does not allow for birthright citizenship, even though those exact words are in the Constitution. Maybe he has an argument, maybe he doesn't. But is he trying to say that he gets to unilaterally decide what the Constitution says? Of course not. That's absurd. And since these policies will affect millions and millions of people, is he really saying that every individual must go to court to make the same claim? Of course not. This is an issue of constitutional interpretation that has to be addressed by the courts. Whether it's one person or a million people, the same question is presented. And what the courts are doing is they're holding the status quo so that this critical constitutional issue can be decided by the courts, which is the branch of government that is responsible for interpreting the Constitution. So this idea that because Donald Trump was elected, that somehow that means he can do whatever he wants is absurd. Every president is elected, and that does not mean that they can violate the Constitution simply because they were elected.
And speaking of the Constitution, President Trump says he's not joking about potentially seeking a third term, saying that there are methods that could allow him to do it. You're both a congressman and also a lawyer. So what's your take on that, given the term limits in the 22nd Amendment?
Well, as you may know, I've introduced a resolution simply to reaffirm that the 22nd Amendment means what it says. This should be very simple for my Republican colleagues to get on, because the 22nd Amendment is crystal clear that a president may serve only 2 terms. Donald Trump, as part of his effort to usurp the government for his own personal uses, to take over all control and to do whatever he wants as a dictator, is laying the foundation for him to claim that he can defy the Constitution and serve a 3rd term. That is plainly unconstitutional. And again, who should decide that? I'll go back to this issue of nationwide injunctions. Who should decide whether or not the Constitution means what it says? Obviously, the courts. Marbury versus Madison, the most seminal case in the Supreme Court jurisdiction, says that the Supreme Court says what the law is. And Donald Trump is clearly pushing, and he's not joking, he never jokes, pushing for an unconstitutional third term because it would be the last step in his effort to become Vladimir Putin for the United States and a total dictator.
Now, I also want to ask you about Democrats, because they're facing questions over the party's direction. California Governor Gavin Newsom called the Democratic brand toxic. Colorado Senator Michael Bennet says the party's associated with educated elites in New York and California rather than working people. You represent New York. What do you think about that criticism?
I think it's really important that we get back to basics about what we stand for. And what we stand for is giving Americans the opportunity to pursue the American dream and giving everyone that opportunity and making sure that any inequalities are fixed, that we have equal rights, that we have social justice, that we have individual freedoms, all of which makes this country so great. And what we are focusing on now is explaining to the American people how Donald Trump completely lied to them. He has broken every promise he made as it relates to the economy. He sold middle-class Americans a bill of goods. And what he's doing right now is undermining all of the critical government programs that so many of them rely on. And what we stand for is making sure that people have that basic safety net and that they have an opportunity to pursue the American dream. And that's what we need to get back to talking about.
All right, Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman, we appreciate your time today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.